It's nice to see so many familiar faces. What we should start with is the fundamental question, which is, how do you motivate people? Except it's the wrong question. It's not the question that you should be asking, which sounds like heresy. Like, isn't that my job as a leader, as a manager, to motivate people to get the best out of them? In fact, it really is the wrong question. The right question is, how do I stop destroying the motivation that people naturally bring to their organizations every day? We're going to come back and talk to that. In fact, there are a lot of misperceptions, unhelpful beliefs, even mythologies that perhaps many of you, but often managers in general, hold about workers and work. And so when I was putting the presentation together, I said, why don't we have a little fun? And so what I put together is just a list of some facts and fictions about work and workers. And why don't we just take a minute? Why don't you read them? You have a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper. And why don't you just write down for yourself which ones you think are facts and which ones you think are fictions. They're all fictions. I know. You knew that might be the case, but you still put fact down for some of them, right? So just who has one or two that they'd like me just to talk through? Number one. I was waiting. So that's the one that I always get a lot of pushback on. And in the book we talk about all of these in various ways. But number one is a trick. In fact, it is true that when people leave companies, often the last thing that they're leaving is their boss, right? People have experienced that and seen that. But in fact, when you look at the data, the reason people stay at companies is because of their boss. 75% of all employees feel very strongly about the relationship they have with their boss. So in fact, it's the boss isn't the cause of most morale problems. In fact, the boss is the reason that most employees stay. And in fact, when they've reached their last straw, often it's then, and the relationship with my boss has gone south and I leave. But that's often the last thing, not the first thing. So the immediate manager isn't the reason for morale problems. In fact, the immediate manager is the only thing often standing between the door and the employee. So what are some of the key questions? Is it in fact true that just by giving employees what they want, companies can profit? Is it in fact knowable? What are the goals of people at work? Can we understand them? How complicated are they? And is it in fact possible to create a work environment that simultaneously delivers what employees want and what businesses need to be successful? These are the things that we're going to work through as we go through the day today. So I want to talk about data. I want to talk about the conclusions that we've come to based on a long run of data going back to the early 70s. When we were putting the book together, we had the first edition that came out in 2005, and then we had this second edition that came out last year. As you can see, there's a lot of companies and a lot of data and based systematic research. And what we focused on is trying to understand, how do you get the most out of people? That was the fundamental question. How do you get people to go above and beyond what's expected of them at work? Now, the kinds of things that we're going to talk about here probably aren't for all companies. The kinds of things that I'm going to talk about here today aren't about trying to make a quick buck. In fact, the kinds of things we're going to talk about are probably an opposite to that. For those companies that are out trying to make a quick buck, the kinds of things that we're going to talk about probably won't work well for them. And second, when I talk about performance, I'm not talking about how do we do well next year. I'm talking about long-term sustainable performance. The Mayo Clinic has been around for 100 years and is arguably the best place to be if you're not feeling well. And it does so at a very low cost. And how does it do it? That's what I mean by long-term sustainable performance. And so we end up talking about 3 what we call irrefutable truths. The first, of course, is that employee enthusiasm, not mere satisfaction, is a key driver of differentiated marketplace success. Second, that the source of the enthusiasm that employees are able to bring to work every day is brought out by the culture of the company. And when I say the culture of the company, I'm not talking about the words on the walls, I'm talking about what happens day to day. The day-to-day leadership and management practices and policies and procedures that determines what goes on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. And the third truth is that that culture, in very large parts, is determined not only by senior leadership, but especially that CEO. Let's start with the business case. The so what, the why should I care? Focusing on employee morale, and listen, and let's not quibble. Morale, commitment, engagement, satisfaction, enthusiasm. Let's not get into semantics. I'm talking about people who care a lot, period. Right? So we'll get past that. This is the so what. This isn't about the morality of how you should lead and manage people every day. I mean, for some people, it's a moral issue. I want to treat people in a particular way. But it's not a moral issue. It's a business issue. I have 2 studies here. The first is one that I did, and the second is one that others did. On the top, what we did is we took our clients and we divided them into 3 groups. The top quartile of employee morale, the middle 50, and the bottom. And then what we did is we looked at their stock performance. So obviously we're looking at our clients that are public companies. And we benched them against their industry sectors. So if it was a tech company, it was against the S&P for the tech. If it was a financial service company, it was against the S&P for the financial services company. And we looked at that data. The average return for the year that we did this was about 15% for those top quartile companies. That was 11 points higher than the average for their industry sector. So they were about 4%. You with me? Incredible, right? That middle 50 had almost no benefit for the morale. And if you were in the bottom quartile, not so good, right? You say, well, maybe this is a one-off. By the way, I've done this analysis for a decade, and it's never come out different. Now, when it's a recession, you don't see 15% returns. You see no returns. And the data moves accordingly, but you always find the effect. The bottom is we took a look at some research that was done by Russell Investments. They tracked the 100 best companies to work for. Is it clear what we're saying? And so differentiated marketplace success for high morale environments. And it's just not in the marketplace. As you can see, there's a bunch of other outcomes, withdrawal behaviors, efficiency, effectiveness, quality, and so forth, that are affected by a workforce that is enthusiastic about coming to work every day and doing good things. So then we come back to the beginning. So how do I motivate employees? And I'm going to say to you again, it's still the wrong question. If having high morale workforce is the way we want to go, how do I motivate them be the wrong question? It's not about motivating, it's about stop demotivating them, the things that get in the way. And so here's some data. So we took, not too much data, maybe 400 companies, maybe 4 million employees, give or take. And we looked at their tenure with the company, and we looked at their level of satisfaction, and we're plotting the percent who are satisfied. And you can see that employees join companies how? Enthusiastic. Why are they enthusiastic? Because they've made a choice to accept what you're selling. You sold them an employee value proposition that for them met some of their key goals of work. They agreed to come, they come on board, they have no expectation to expect anything else. Then what happens? Then they begin to experience day to day those leadership and management practices, and what happens to morale? Morale declines. until it reaches a bottom. And again, companies differ, but about 3 to 5 years, they begin to reach that bottom. Then what happens? Well, two things happen. The first is the most dissatisfied leave. Okay? So now you have the most dissatisfied, the data starts to come up a little bit. And then the second, you get a little cognitive dissonance. Because if I'm still here, either I'm an idiot or it ain't that bad. And so the data begins to come up. And what you can find when you look at the best performing companies as defined by morale is that the scalloping is almost non-existent. You don't find that drop. Because in fact, they're meeting the goals of the workforce.